Hello and welcome to another episode of Statford Bridge. Chelsea by the numbers. We're back after a weekend match that was comfortable and not comfortable all at the same time. Chelsea win 2-1 at the King Power against Leicester in what was one of their statistically most impressive performances of the season. And Chelsea were just straight up pretty good. If we jump right into the stats, Chelsea win 2-1, a Nico Jackson goal in the first half, an Enzo Fernandez goal in the second half before giving up a late, kind of silly penalty. But Chelsea were thoroughly dominant as you would expect a team who is like fighting for being a comfortable top four team and trying to separate themselves from the Aston Villas and the Spurs and the Uniteds of the world. Chelsea were as dominant as you would expect away from home against a newly promoted team. 2.8 to 1.1 on the XG. And again, most of that is a late penalty. They only give up 4 shots the whole game, only one of which is kind of scary, an Ndidi cutback. We'll talk about the Meketier chance because I think people very, very heavily overreacted to that. But not a ton given up defensively, and Chelsea just created shot after shot after shot in the box. A plus 12 shot differential, 4 big chances. I mean, they have a shot blocked on the goal line by his own teammate. It was a pretty comprehensive performance from Chelsea. They don't give up a single shot from a set piece. Like, at one point in the first half, kind of before the stretch of 10 minutes where Leicester were semi-dangerous, I was like thinking, I wonder if Chelsea are going to pitch a no-hitter here where they don't give up a shot the whole game. That's how comfortable they were. And I think this was a really, really nice moment for this team that has been just good without being excellent. And I thought against Leicester they were excellent. I think they create 3 really, really high quality chances that are like extremely good chances. And then they create 2 or 3 like quite good ones. And at the end of the day, you're going to win those games much more often than not, especially when you give up basically nothing going the other way. And I think there's 2 things that I want to talk about in this game. And the first is kind of the reaction to the performance, where I think there's some negativity around the fact that like Chelsea didn't win by more, which is fair. But what's frustrating is I think those same people will then turn around when Chelsea don't play great but win anyways and say, well, Chelsea were terrible today. And it's like, okay, pick one. Either they played well or they didn't, and either they won or they didn't. You can't like beat them with both sticks. You know what I mean? And I think that's a thing that has been like kind of frustrating to follow this year. Like, there are people who are critical of the Wolves or the Bournemouth performance, which are totally reasonable performances to be critical of. I don't think Chelsea were very good in either of those games. Yet they come away with important wins, huge wins, while not playing great. And at the same time, they play great against Leicester and come away with a somewhat squeaky win. It just seems very odd to be critical of both to me. It doesn't feel like the right lens to view it through. But to each their own, I suppose. The other thing I want to talk about is how Chelsea set up tactically. Chelsea set up with Wesley Fofana as a right back in a back 4. Levi Colwill and Benoit Badiashile, the 2 lefties, and then Marco Corella at left back. Nominally, João Felix started as the winger, which was a new wrinkle. And Enzo Fernandez was like the right 6, the right 8. And perhaps the most interesting part of this is what that looked like in possession, because Enzo Maresca dropped out something that we have not seen so far this season. Chelsea built with a back 3 of Fofana, Colwill, and Badiashile, because that is Benoit and not Malo Gusto. Built with a back 3 of Fofana, Colwill, and Badiashile, who I thought Badiashile was excellent excellent in this match. And instead of having Cucurella invert and Enzo high or whatever, however you wanted, and Felix holding width, Marc Cucurella held width on the left. João Felix became a left 8 or a left 10. Enzo Fernandez was a right 8 or a right 10, and Cole Palmer was free to influence both sides of the pitch. And I think this was a really good solution. What we've seen Chelsea have some trouble with is when teams defend in a pretty tight 4-4-2, is that when you go with the double pivot, it's too easy to stack those players on your double sixes and then have your wingers do a job with the 10s and stay narrow, or have your winger deal with their winger and have your fullback manage. Like, Chelsea have had a not great time dealing with that. And what you've seen a lot is like Cole Palmer on either side has to come very wide to get the ball, very wide. And so by shifting into this diamond, Nico Jackson becomes a lot less important for build-up and is more threatening depth. But you end up in this situation where when your back three has the ball, if one of the 9s engages the back three, and Leicester pressed in a 4-4-2 that was almost 4-2-4-y in kind of middle and high situations where they had Ndidi stepping out as the second presser, which was an insane way to play to me. But then in deeper situations, they would have the winger track the fullback and have the fullback manage the 10. And it would be like 5-3-2 almost. So kind of a weird one. But I thought what Chelsea did a really good job of was when you set up the diamond like this, as soon as the ball goes into a wide situation, so into one of the wide center backs, particularly with Badiashile, you end up with this situation where Felix sits in the pocket, and if the winger steps, you can play around into Felix, and you're able to get 2v2s with runners on the weak side. Or if they overshift, you can end up with these situations where Palmer comes, Felix comes, and Enzo can come into this gap, and they were able to go boom into the next line and do whatever they want all the time. And it was a very, very difficult job for Leicester to get their weak side player to come in. And then if the weak side player comes in, you can free Fofana to go. And Fofana, if you look at kind of the progressive metrics, had like 8 up yards on the carry a lot of the time because Chelsea would shrink the pitch so dramatically to the left that now when you find him free, he can steal 40 yards and really get you out of kind of these deeper build phases. And I mean, I've been banging the drum about this for like a season and a half now, but Enzo Fernandez is a way better player when he plays on the right side of the pitch. He doesn't have to turn as much. He can do everything in 1 or 2 touches. His arrivals into the box are much cleaner. He can make the run in behind. We saw so many times where the ball would go to Madueke and Enzo would make the channel run. And now it's not like Palmer being taken out of there. It's Enzo. And Enzo actually is like much more of a threat on the ball than someone like Malo Gusto, who's been in that role. And he got into those spots a few times and didn't turn it into anything amazing. But also he makes the run into the box for the Jackson knockdown that ends up, or the Jackson header and save, which ends up being a goal. And he was just so much more dangerous on the right side of the pitch. So much more dangerous. Again, was he too high for my liking? Yeah, probably. Do I want him like next to Jackson when Chelsea played direct long balls? No, probably not. But I'll take him doing that from the right side of the pitch over trying to do it from the left, where he just turns around and circulates it. I thought he was much, much, much more dangerous. And that was kind of the story of the game for me. I thought Madueke didn't have a great game again. I thought Cucurella was okay. I thought João Felix was quite good. I would really like to see Nkunku in the same role, but I thought João Felix was quite good. Particularly defensively, he stood out to me as much more diligent than I was expecting. But I think one of the things he does that is very valuable, and I've spoken about this with Jadon Sancho, is like when you end up with the center back has to play the straight ones between lines, João Felix is very good in these pockets to turn or to win fouls. He's very good at retaining possession between lines. And I think his like risk tolerance And again, this is a guy, like, he took 3 shots. None of them were particularly good. He doesn't really create anything. I think his risk tolerance is very needed for this Chelsea team, especially against weaker opponents. Now, going into the Villa game next week, like, is this how I would play? No. I think this diamond leaves you open enough in transitions. We saw a few times, like the McAteer chance, that it leaves Caicedo a little bit too isolated. Now, the second thing that I really wanted to talk about is that people have way over-indexed to this McAteer chance where, yes, it's a pacey transition, right? Like, it's Leicester play out from their own box. They kind of break. Caicedo gets pulled in to try and jump and win it and start the counter the other way. Gets played around, and Leicester end up in this like quasi 3v3 transition, and it ends up in a shot from the edge of the box from a not great angle that goes just wide. And it's a scary moment because it goes just wide. And it's a scary moment because the Leicester crowd, who had nothing to even hope for 37 minutes, gets a little pop of like, nice transition, like we have a chance in this game still. But ultimately, like, it was not that dangerous a chance. Like, it's not from a great angle. He puts it in an inch past Badiashile, and it's not actually that close to going in. Like, there's a lot of worlds where it just gets blocked and we don't even think about it. And I think it would probably behoove Chelsea to actually be willing to eat that risk a little bit more frequently, especially against worse teams. Now, Chelsea have had a strange schedule so far in that they have not played very many worse teams, at least in the league. Like, it's been the last kind of game as easy as Leicester was, like maybe Forest in October, the beginning of October, or West Ham in the middle of September. So maybe I'm overreacting and like it's super not necessary. But I thought Chelsea had like a pretty correct degree of risk tolerance for this game. And there's many worlds where like Romeo Lavia doesn't decide to just like bring down De Cordova-Reid, and you're coming away with like a really, really comprehensive performance you're not worried about. At the same time, like Wesley Fofana, I thought gave away a clear penalty that wasn't given, and Ndidi probably should have a red card, and there's lots of things to talk about there, but I think ultimately, like, Chelsea were quite good, and they were very comfortable. On the other side of that, there's like real big picture things to talk about that I think are fun. If we look at the year-over-year comparison stuff, Chelsea look terrific compared to last year. We've now played 12 matches. Luton here is the substitute for Leicester, as Luton came 18th. Leicester won the championship. That's your equivalence. I tweeted this week incorrectly that it was championship winner versus championship winner, but it is 18th is the championship winner, 19th is second, 20th is the playoff winner. Doesn't exactly work like that, but might as well. And that was like not a great performance for Chelsea last year. They win 3-2 in a reasonable XG loss. They gave up a tremendous amount of set piece XGD, which we're going to talk about. Negative shot difference, hugely negative box touch difference. Like, it's just becoming more and more apparent week after week after week that like this Chelsea team is probably just better than last year. And after 3 weeks in a row of basically running a 0 expected goal difference, and there's some penalties against in there, real nice performance. And now we have kind of a really solid track record of Palace and West Ham and Brighton and Forest and Leicester that, like, against teams that Chelsea are better than, they smush them. And I said at the beginning of the season that if you were asking me kind of what I expected from a like season prediction standpoint, right? Like, I was pretty confident Chelsea would make top 4, but what I thought Chelsea's top 4 run would look like in comparison to last year, where last year Chelsea were quite good in the big games, but really struggled in terms of earning points, even though they played okay, was against weaker teams. And this year, Chelsea's record against stronger teams is like solid in terms of performances, right? Like between City home, Liverpool away, Newcastle home, United away, Arsenal home, Chelsea have basically an exactly 0 expected goal difference, which you'd like it to be maybe a little bit better than that, but that's not awful. And they've probably been a little bit unfortunate to only take 5 points from those 5 matches. But against the teams worse than them, in Palace, in West Ham, in Brighton and Forest, Brighton and Forest are no slouches. Like, and Leicester, Chelsea put up like real performances. And if we're talking like kind of purely difference, it's 2/3 of an expected goal at this point. That's across 12 games. That's 8 goals of expected goal difference. And if you want an example of like a huge amount of where that's coming from, Chelsea are -3 on penalties this year. They've conceded 4. They've won 1. And last year, Chelsea were +6. That's 7 expected goals right there. And so you kind of have to wonder, like, how much were penalties juicing the numbers last year? And maybe the way Chelsea played in such a chaotic nature was more amenable to winning penalties. I think that's a fairly tenuous argument. But it's pretty clear. Goal difference, it's 13 goals better across 12 games. Expected goals, it's a quarter of a goal better. On the defensive side, it's half a goal better. Like, the defensive stuff is at this point clearly very real. Like, I don't think you can really disregard that, where Chelsea are both conceding fewer shots and the shots are of significantly lower quality. Chelsea are +2 in shots for, -3 in shots against, +10 in box touch differential in kind of 3 and 7, where they are tilting the field more, they are creating more and giving up fewer shots of better and worse quality, respectively. Through 12 games, like it's pretty hard to be negative about what the metrics are saying. And like, I mean, I remember after week 4, where you kind of scrape Bournemouth and played pretty terrible in that game, people saying Chelsea would be 12th right now, and that like, oh, this is bad. And instead, across the next games, you have Chelsea are still in 3rd, 22 points from 19. My kind of chasing pack model that like I'm going to have to start adding Brighton to this because Brighton just keep winning, has Chelsea at 70 points. Opta analysts have them at 53% top 4 probability. The betting markets have it more like 62, 63% at this point. Kind of when you bake the vig out there, you can just call it 60%. Like, this is it's a real team. And so really, like, Spurs taking unexpected points against Man City this weekend is like a pretty big swing, but Villa dropping points, Newcastle dropping points, United dropping points. Like, it's at a point now where if the Premier League is going to have 5 Champions League places, I would say it's like 90% or higher that Chelsea are going to be a top 4 team. And it's going to be Spurs and Chelsea are 4 and 5, and I don't think anyone else is going to be close. And luckily for us, in terms of learning things, because we like to learn things, Chelsea play Villa on the weekend, and they play Spurs the weekend after that. Or 2 weeks after that. And those 2 matches are going to be huge, to the point that I would say if Chelsea win both of those games, Villa go down to 56 on this, I would say at this point they are done. There is no way that they will make Champions League. Spurs go down to stay at 68 because we beat them last year, but Chelsea go up to 73. And now we're talking about 10-point improvement year over year. And you have Southampton somewhere in there. You have a somewhat soft rest of the first half of the season schedule. And then you go through the whole second half where Spurs are going to have the bookend of a Europa League season, and they're going into the Christmas period with Bentancur suspended and Van de Ven injured. Vicario, the goalkeeper, just had ankle surgery because he fractured his ankle. I think that's a huge loss for them. He has been very good. And he is very critical to how they defend in terms of his sweeping ability. So, to me, it's becoming very difficult to envision Chelsea going from here. But again, there's 26 games left. Lots of things can happen. Cole Palmer and Nico Jackson could break their leg tomorrow. I think that, excuse me, I think that the Nico Jackson thing is like particularly one to glance at with a little bit of pulling on your collar and uncertainty, because I think it's very clear that he's critical to how Chelsea play. And as he scores an unbelievable goal and then creates the second by absolutely ragdolling Okoli. And it is quite fun to see how like dominant physically he is against most center backs. And I look forward to what he's going to do to Southampton. I think that's going to be really fun. But that's where things are year over year. It's pretty hard to be upset. And the last thing I want to talk about is the set piece stuff. There was a few people tweeting out the McClockbot radars comparing 2023 to 2024. And there's a few metrics on that. So for the audio-only listeners, it's kind of these team performance radars that use like a more general term than a specific metric. So performance is just X points. Attack is open play expected goals per 90. Set pieces is set piece expected goals per 90. Pressing is PPDA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that was really standing out to people was that Chelsea are now 75th percentile for set piece expected goal difference per 90. And these are across the top 5 leagues. I think it's not just the Premier League. I think it's top 5 leagues. So there's some like Premier League bias where the Premier League teams are generally a bit better than the rest of Europe. But Chelsea have been a very solidly positive set piece team. They give up nothing from defensive set pieces against Leicester on the weekend, where if I pull that back up, they give up how many corners? I'm not sure. They give up 2 corners and a whole bunch of wide free kicks and nothing. Leicester cross 9 times or 8 times. They connect on 0. One of them. I thought Chelsea were just very, very good at defending set pieces. On the flip side, they get 9 corners. They only put up 0.09 XG. That's not amazing. It's not even very good. Kind of your average corner is like 0.04, but generally it's kind of broken up into like big chances and then nothing. But I thought Chelsea had a couple really creative routines with Badiashile gets a free header at the back post that's called the foul for kind of nothing. They had like 2 that are inches from flick-ons at the near post. I thought having Enzo Fernandez on the pitch is really huge for set pieces. Dimitri tweeted today about how he doesn't want Cole Palmer on corners. I would be very open to seeing Madueke take some corners because I do think the in-swingers are very valuable. But across the board, man, Chelsea look pretty good on set pieces. The defensive set pieces look good, especially when you're able to play Fofana and 2 center backs. It opens up a lot of doors for you. Now, the last thing to talk about, because this is a long pod episode, Chelsea play Heidenheim midweek in Germany for the Conference League, and Heidenheim have not had a great year. They're just above the relegation zone. They're quite a bit better than that on the expected goal difference. They're basically 0, which for a team of their budget is quite impressive. They were big overperformers last year, and they're getting hammered by injuries and are out with like a lot of guys missing. I think they were up 2-0 on the weekend against Leverkusen and then lose 5-2, which is quite impressive, but that's the Bundesliga. It's crazy. I think the real thing for Chelsea now, and what I am super curious about, is who plays. Because based on the weekend, you had Badiashile, you had Felix, and you had Enzo Fernandez, who have all been Conference League guys, all started. And you have Malo Gusto, who misses out on the weekend. You have Pedro Neto, who misses out on the weekend. It's like, well, are they going to play? And so I think there's a quite interesting world that I think we are probably going to see Mykhailo Mudryk start. Jadon Sancho is back in training, so I think we might see him. But I would be very unsurprised if we saw Tyreek George start. And I think at the back, it becomes interesting of who plays between. Badiashile is probably not going to do 2 games in a week. Maybe he does. But are we going to see Tosin and Disasi as center backs, which opens up the door of who's going to play right back? Is it Malo Gusto? Is it going to be Renato Vega and Tosin at center backs, and Disasi plays right back for Cucurella to start? I think there's a lot of very interesting doors to open there. And then the same thing with the wingers. Is it going to be George and Mudryk? Is it going to be Neto and Mudryk? Is it going to be Neto and George? Is Sancho going to start? I don't know. And in midfield now, you almost certainly have to play one of Caicedo or Enzo Fernandez again, because Romeo Lavia is not registered for the competition. So I think that is, again, another really interesting one. But I've been quite happy in general with the way Enzo Maresca has run like the overall minutes, as much as I've hated the subs. They're too late. There's not enough of them, all of that. I think the overarching rotation patterns have been quite good. Anyways, that's it for me. If you're liking the pod, give it a sub, give it a Blue Sky retweet or a Twitter retweet or a comment or whatever. If there's things you want to talk about, let me know. I will be live after the Heidenheim game. It's Thanksgiving in the U.S., so I will not be at work, and we can do it like it's a weekend. And that's it. Chelsea win again. The women's team beat Manchester United 1-0 in what was a very comfortable 1-0 that also had lots of scary moments, but they were very comfortable in general in that game. They've won every single match. I don't want to say the I word, but I might say the I word. That's it. As always, enjoy the soccer.